cars have been involved in an accident causing long queues back towards the M62. In Berkshire on the M4, one-lane shut westbound 6 to 7 near Slough, where a car's broken down. In South London and Mitcham, the A236 Western Road shut for a second day westbound at Hope and Way. Emergency repairs have been ongoing since yesterday morning. And the M5 in Somerset is closed in both directions from junction 24 to 25. So this is just to the north of Taunton as accident investigation work continues. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have 2 prize bundles that have to be won. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. Hurry, lines close on the 7th of March. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word. A very, very good evening to you. It's Wednesday, the 26th of February. I'm Martin Daubly, and I'm standing in for Nigel Farage. Nigel isn't here because he's in the House of Commons voting on that historic Chagos Islands deal. Let me tell you this, after Donald Trump's first cabinet conference earlier on at the White House, I think that deal is dead in the water. I think that Sir Keir Starmer is walking into a lion's den, the likes of which he's never seen. I think Donald Trump is about to use him as a toothpick. I seriously think the Chagos Islands deal is dead. More on that later. Tonight, we've got a GB News exclusive from the Centre for Migration Control. For the first time, it reveals that the Home Office is granting tens of thousands of benefit-claiming migrants the right to remain in the UK. We'll have a league table of shame of those claiming the most benefits, and we'll break down those numbers for you and discuss what it means for you, the taxpayer. And as I've just said, Donald Trump has just held his first cabinet meeting, declaring the Ukraine war wouldn't have started under him and won't end without him. He called Vladimir Putin very smart and very cunning, and he promised America will get its money back from Ukraine. With the Zelensky meeting set up for this Friday, is President Trump really the one to end the war in Ukraine? And cut back on 2 kebabs a week, pay more to fly and ditch your gas boiler. Yes, Britain's climate future depends on it, or so we're told. Is this a fair plan, or just a joyless sacrifice where they turn us into a nation of Jeremy Corbyns? And Nigel Farage has hit back after a Reform UK meeting in Norfolk's poshest town was mysteriously cancelled. Is this another example of free speech being under threat?
Pub has so much rizz, and here's why. Spill the tea.
And old age pensioners, viral TikTokers using Gen Z slang have saved an historic pub. I'll be joined by one of those campaigners later in the show for saving a great British boozer. That's coming up soon. But first, here's your headlines with Sophia Wensler.
Martin, thank you. Good evening. It's just gone 7 o'clock. These are your headlines. Donald Trump has confirmed President Zelensky will visit him on Friday to sign a very big agreement. The US president held his first cabinet meeting at the White House since his inauguration last month, joined by his billionaire advisor, Elon Musk. Attention quickly turned to the minerals deal with Ukraine.
President Zelensky is going to be coming on Friday. That's now confirmed, and we're going to be signing an agreement, which will be a very big agreement. And I want to thank Howard and Scott for the job you guys did in putting it together. Really did an amazing job. And that'll be on rare earth and other things.
He went on to say the United States would not be making security guarantees for Ukraine in its deal to end the war with Russia, but that Europe would. Meanwhile, Downing Street has confirmed that Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky will meet with Sir Keir Starmer and other European leaders in London on Sunday. It is thought that Mr. Zelensky is planning to make the trip to discuss defence. Elsewhere, Sir Keir Starmer has refused to say if the deal to give away the Chagos Islands to Mauritius would be funded by the increase in defence spending. The Prime Minister told the Commons that the increase to 2.5% of GDP is our capability on defence and security in Europe, and described the deal being negotiated with Mauritius as extremely important for our security. Tory MP Kieran Mullen asked Sir Keir during the Prime Minister's questions to give an unequivocal answer on where the money would come from, but the Prime Minister declined to say whether money for the deal would come out of the increase in defence spending. GB News can exclusively reveal more than 2,000 small boat migrants have crossed the Channel illegally since the start of the year. The latest group of 138 arrived last night, brought into Dover by Border Force after being picked up in UK waters. Earlier, another boat was intercepted after some on board refused French rescue and continued towards Britain. The government is pushing new laws to criminalise those who reject rescue as Labour vows to smash the gangs. The Vatican has said Pope Francis's condition has improved slightly and his mild kidney problems have been resolved. The Vatican also says the Pope's CT scan has shown a normal evolution of the pulmonary inflammation. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Gossip Girl actress Michelle Trachtenberg has died aged 39. The actress was found dead at her home in New York City after officers responded to a 911 call just after 8 a.m. local time this morning. Trachtenberg was best known for her work as Dawn Summers in Buffy and playing Georgina Sparks on Gossip Girl. An investigation into her death has been opened, but criminality is not suspected. That's according to the police. Those are the latest GB News headlines. Now it's back to Martin.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Very, very good evening to you, and thank you, Sophia. Now, new figures from the Centre for Migration Control reveal a staggering trend. Migrants who are overwhelmingly dependent on UK benefits are still being handed settled status in huge numbers. Now, take this. 42% of Congolese migrants in Britain are on benefits. For Iraqis, it's 44%. Afghans, 42%. And yet, in the past 4 years alone, the government has granted settled status to over 26,000 Afghans, 22,000 Iranians, and nearly 18,000 Eritreans, all among the highest benefit-claiming groups. And meanwhile, the British taxpayer, of course, is left to foot the bill. With record levels of immigration and a welfare system already under massive strain, why is the government rewarding dependency with the right to stay? Well, I'm joined now by the Research Director of the Centre for Migration Control, Rob Bates, and I'm also joined by my celebrious panel, and that is the former Defence Secretary Jeff Hoon. He's a Derby County fan, but I'll let him off that, and the former Conservative MP Alexander Stafford. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Rob, going to start with you. First of all, thank you for giving this exclusively to Farage tonight. An incredible set of figures. Tell me how you got this data, because you and I are continually talking about the data that the Home Office, the Department of Work and Pensions do not want us to have. How did you get this data?
So look, DWP and HMRC are incredibly reluctant to release this information for the most recent years. What we can do, however, is look back on the most recent data that was released in 2021 and follow the trends of those data sets that were released from 2013 onwards. And if you take that all together, you identify a very clear trend in that certain nationalities are disproportionately represented in those claiming universal credit, housing benefit, child support and whatnot. And I think this is a really important discussion that we need to have, because it really gets to the heart of who is our immigration system actually serving, what is the point of it and what is the purpose of it. And I think if we were to actually have policymakers and politicians that were to look at those benefit claim rates per nationality and take that into account when issuing visas, we'd end up with a system that is much more effective and actually works in the favour of British taxpayers. At the moment, we've got over 1 million foreign-born individuals in this country that are claiming some form of benefit, and that probably comes to a bill of about £8 billion per year for those individuals before you even take into account their actual benefit claims. So there are huge costs involved in this, and it's very important that we start taking it seriously.
And if we go back to that first graphic there, the benefit claims per 1,000, at the bottom we've got the white chart. That is the median. That's the UK propensity to claim benefits. And we can clearly see from this, Rob Bates, the ratio going up to claim benefits with the Congolese. What is that, something like 4.5 times more likely to claim benefits than Brits?
Yeah, it's 4.2 times. There are actually 40 countries, 40 nationalities across the board that have a higher claim rate than the British. There's actually probably a few more than that. It's just, unfortunately, due to data restrictions and the fact that we are not able to disentangle children from these figures, the figure actually probably for working age populations is probably higher for these nationalities. And the real point is that we currently have a system in place, indefinite leave to remain, where once an individual is granted that, they have carte blanche to claim these benefits and to enjoy all the rights that come with that. And unfortunately, there doesn't seem to be any real conversation on whether this is an appropriate system to still be in place in Britain in 2025. Obviously, Kemi Badenoch made some announcements that they would be extending that period, but we need to really have a conversation about whether it is suitable for a period of mass migration where it's running net 500,000 a year. It was obviously introduced at a time when net migration was actually in the minus figures. It was actually running about minus 40,000 when it was first introduced. And I think there's obviously a clear ticking time bomb with the huge levels that we've seen. Those individuals that have arrived from 2021 onwards will soon be eligible to claim indefinitely to remain, and therefore will be becoming eligible to claim benefits. We've calculated roughly that if we were to take these same proportions on those individuals that will be soon claiming settled status, there'll be about another 160,000 benefit claimants added to the stockpile, costing the British taxpayer between £2 and £3 billion a year.
Eye-watering sums of money. And something that leaps out from this list to me, Rob, countries like Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria. We have no returns deal with those countries. They're deemed unsafe countries. This is a problem. It's an expensive problem. It's a stubborn problem, and a problem seemingly with no end in sight. Might there be a conversation then about, well, perhaps we should have an effective immigration policy about taking these kinds of people in the first place at all? We have that conversation in the Netherlands. Recently, they published their data on this. We have it in Denmark. We have it in Germany. There is a widespread continental awakening to the cost of certain nations. Now, facts aren't racist. These are facts, and they are nationwide trends that stand up. On the basis of this information, do you think we should perhaps be saying, well, are we sure about taking more people in from Congo?
We absolutely should, on the basis of this information, and then on the basis of the crime information that we also have coming out into the public domain. It's very important that we have a tailor-made immigration system that recognises patterns. As you say, facts can't be racist. Unfortunately, we had introduced in 2010 the Equality Act, which has caused the Home Office no end of problems when it comes to actually trying to introduce a tailor-made immigration system, because when they do try and discriminate against certain nationalities that we know aren't conducive to the public good in Britain, they find themselves absolutely bombarded with legal challenge after legal challenge.
Rob Bates, is excellent data. You know, hats off to you for persevering with this. I know it takes you ages and ages and ages. Just to point out, we have approached the Home Office for a comment on this, and they haven't got back to us. But we did reach out. If you're listening, Home Office, please get in touch and let us know, are these facts true? Because every time we put them out there, you say, oh, we don't recognise the figures. Well, what are the figures? Perhaps you ought to publish them. Let's bring my panel in now. That's Jeff Hoon and Alexander Stafford. Mr. Hoon, I'd like to start with you. British taxpayers are going to look at this and think, this just isn't fair. You know, thousands upon thousands of people are being allowed into the country, not working for many years. We can't get them out of the country. An £8 billion bill. Should we do something about this?
I think the first thing is we need to get this in the right order, because people are here for 5 years before they're able to claim benefits. And in those circumstances, we really need to understand that at that stage they have become settled here and they're entitled to remain here. And that's the way the law works. They can't claim benefits during that 5-year period. Now, I accept that there is a policy debate to be had.
We're still looking at taxpayers' expense for those 5 years.
I don't think they are, because they're not entitled to claim benefits. They may well be working, they may well be they may be dependent on other people who are working, a whole range of ways in which they raise money. Now, I accept that. And the Conservatives have raised this recently, that there is a policy debate to be had about how long people should remain and be settled before they can claim benefits. It's a perfectly legitimate debate to be having. But 5 years is a very long time. And you use the word fairness. Is it fair that someone should get benefits after 5 years of living in this country? Many people would say it is fair.
OK, Alexander Stafford, let's bring you in. We've got a terrible problem with spying immigration. As we said, a lot of that happened under the Conservative government. This is yet more grist to the mill. People are sick of this now.
Yeah, it's an absolute failure, not just the people coming into the country, the numbers are way too high, but also when people do come here, certain nationalities, as this data shows, clearly aren't working and paying into the system. It was one thing coming into the UK, but we don't want people coming here to claim benefits. We want them to be good, economic, productive people. So with the government, we are failing people when they do come here by not actually giving them the skills, opportunities to work and pay their way. They're coming in here and taking away. We want them to come in here, when they do come here, and actually give something back to society. And this is a failure of integration, if nothing else.
But if you cross-correlate this with other data, Rob Bates, the tax receipts, for example, from certain nations on this list, the productivity of certain nations on this list, you will find actually that even when these nationalities typically across populations do work, they are still a net drain on British society.
Yeah, so if you take that 5 years where migrants are ineligible for most benefits, they are eligible for a certain small number, you realise that the 70% of those that have come to the UK on a work visa, and therefore you would assume are making an economic contribution, aren't actually, by the Home Office's own figures, earning enough to be making a positive fiscal contribution.
So they're a net drain?
They're a net drain, if you will, yes. The amount that we're having to spend on increasing the capital stock or policing and roads and whatnot actually means that these individuals that are earning
Hang on a second, though. Those people, if they're working, they're doing jobs that no one else will do.
Well, is that
very often at low wages? Very often at low wages. That's the point. But nevertheless, they are jobs that are vital in our economy.
Are
because
those delivery drivers?
Well, a lot of people will not do those jobs, and I've seen it for myself.
The point is, let's take the health and social care sector, for instance, which is held up as that job, part of the economy that people simply won't enter into, British people. The ONS predicts that by 2030, or forecasts, around 50% of the roles in the health and social care sector are at risk of automation or will be susceptible to automation.
But that's not the case today.
Well, first and foremost, actually, if you need to take into effect that those individuals that are coming in the health and social care visa route, once they get given settled status, they can go into any part of the economy they want. So the idea that it is plugging the gap and keeping it abreast for long term.
But this comes back to Martin's.
It's a short-term fix.
This comes back to Martin's opening point. Is it fair? The question is, how long should people have to be here before they're entitled to benefits? That's the issue. It's a policy judgment. The Conservatives are moving away from their previous policy to a change and making it 10 years, I've heard speculated about. But at the same time, you have to ask whether 10 years is fair for someone to be here before they can claim any benefit.
What we can conclude is that an £8 billion drain in the economy isn't fair for the British taxpayers. Gentlemen, we have to leave it there. A great start to tonight's Farage. Rob Bates, thank you very much. And also Jeff Hoon and Alexander Stafford. More coming up next, because Donald Trump has just held his first cabinet meeting, declared the Ukraine war wouldn't have started under him and won't end without him. He even called Vladimir Putin very smart and very cunning and promised America will get its money back. Is Trump really the one to end the war? And if you cut back on 2 kebabs a week, if you cut back on 2 kebabs worth of meat a week, pay more to fly and ditch your gas boiler. Britain's climate future depends on it. Or so we're told. But who wants to live a miserable life like that? That's next.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking, this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again. Down to earth. It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it? And most importantly, honest. Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them. They catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
So many people I know this applies to. We are terrified of driving in that because you're literally getting blinded now. What's going on here?
You are. I'm going to be a little bit contentious, though, and say that bright headlights have actually come about in order to make roads safer. Because if, like me, you've had experience of driving older cars, you'll know just how appalling the older style headlights can be. And in fact, you can't actually see very clearly the road ahead. So the new xenon and LED headlight technology actually stemmed from a racing background when cars were racing at night in order to make the roads brighter. Now, I'm not saying that it's not a problem for drivers, but I do sort of think that, this possibly could be part of the whole culture of people liking to have something to complain about. And they kind of need to learn, and I think this really should be part of the driving test. You need to learn how to drive at night and not to look directly into the headlights that are coming towards you.
But the RSC survey also shows, Amanda, that it suggests that there's been at least 200 road accidents which could be directly attributed to people being dazzled by the light. So that can't be good.
No, exactly. And I mean, I'm not belittling the accidents, and I'm certainly not belittling the people who have problems, particularly things like cataracts, which can really be a problem for nighttime driving. And it is a really serious problem when it comes to safety, admittedly. But again, I just feel that, bright headlights actually essentially make the road safer. We've got far more people travelling on the roads these days than we've ever had at any point in history. And so by virtue of the fact, we are going to see these numbers rising because, of course, there are going to be more people who are going to be dazzled by the headlights.
The People's Channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Nigel Farage is currently voting on the Chagos Islands. That's why he's not here tonight. Now, moments ago, Donald Trump gave his first cabinet meeting at the White House. He said he was confident a deal could be done to end the war in Ukraine and that the war would never have started if he was in power, nor would it have ended if he'd lost. And he said Vladimir Putin was very cunning and very smart. Take a look.
All the deals that you've done in your life, all the people you've sat across from and negotiated with, is President Putin distinct in any way?
He's a very smart guy. He's a very cunning person. He had no intention, in my opinion, of settling this war. I think he wanted the whole thing. I think we're going to have a deal. I can't guarantee that. A deal is a deal. Lots of crazy things happen in deals, right? But I think we're going to have a deal. If I didn't get elected, I believe he would have just continued to go through Ukraine, and over a period of time, a lot of people would have been killed.
Well, it was genuinely an astonishing press conference. I'll please recommend watching that back. Let's get my panel involved now. I'm joined by the former Defence Secretary, Jeff Hoon, and the former Conservative MP, Alexander Stafford. Gentlemen, welcome back. Jeff, let's start with you. So quite clearly here, this is the art of the deal. This is the flattery stage of the process, sitting down with Vladimir Putin, very smart, very cunning, setting out the intention that this would have been a war where Putin would have taken all of Ukraine had Donald Trump not get elected. So he's selling the apocalypse And now we're moving on to what the actuality will be. Where will the landing point be? And he's clearly softening the world up, softening Ukraine up to a surrender of some form of territory.
And I think that's exactly right. And I think that's exactly what he did with President Zelensky. He spent his time telling this man that he was a dictator, that he had no legitimacy, putting a huge amount of pressure on him. And then what happens? On Friday, the prospect is that there's going to be a deal over minerals in Ukraine. So he's a deal maker, and he's now turning his attention to, I suspect, a rather more difficult character sitting there in the Kremlin in Moscow. How do you put pressure on a man who is a dictator, who's eliminated any kind of opposition in his country, and who is all-powerful? And that's the challenge for the US president.
What's your take on the notion of the minerals in return for rebuilding deal? I mean, China are doing that around the world, in Africa, and they're not giving billions of dollars towards a war effort. Do you think it seems fair that in return for armaments, in turn for payments to Ukraine, that Donald Trump has every right to have some form of mineral extraction plan which will have to recoup the cost?
Well, again, I think it's very calculating. As I understand it, 75% of the world's minerals of this rare kind are controlled by China. And they have used that control to intimidate the United States. They put bans on, from time to time, on exports to the US. So it's in everyone's interest, actually, for the US to have access to those rare minerals. And I can see that it could well be advantageous for Ukraine to do this deal. Depends on the circumstances, it depends on the context, we don't know the detail. But actually, if it gives the US an interest in protecting and preserving Ukraine as a sovereign nation, then actually that's good for Ukraine.
Alexander Stafford, let's bring you in now. 3 years on, no end to the war in sight, and in swoops Donald Trump. He'd like to portray himself as the saviour, as the man to end this war, but that's looking increasingly likely.
Yeah, well, he's got a lot riding on this. During his election campaign, he did say he would end the war. So actually, there's three people who want this war to end one way: Zelensky, Putin, but also Trump. Trump needs his legacy. He wants to go back after the end of his 4 years, say, I've achieved something, I've stopped a war, I've made a deal where a deal wasn't possible. He had a lot riding on this. He wants to have some sort of deal of any sort. And when you look at the minerals aspect of it, this isn't uncommon for America to do. Go back to the Second World War and Lend-Lease and things. We were paying, Britain, who was fighting Nazi Germany alone, was paying back America until the 90s. America often does this when you have wars. Even on the side of right, they try and demand some sort of money or recompense out of it. So this is out of the American playbook, not just Donald Trump's playbook.
And Jeff Hoon, that's a key point. You know, a lot of people like to say, "Oh, this is raping the natural resources of a country who's been invaded by a dictator." Or, as you said, is it a vested interest? He said initially, "We'll take everything. We'll take billions of dollars worth." He's already rode back on that again. The brinksmanship, the alter deal, perhaps, as in China, without firing a single shot, taking over Africa's resources. This could be the same here. There could be a spoil for Ukraine, American expertise, American money to extract it, to help rebuild the country. By the way, giving contracts to American businesses with a vested interest, American companies on the ground. There might not be American boots on the ground militarily, but a strategic placement will be made which will ensure the future safety of Ukraine.
Well, that's pretty much what I said earlier. And it does seem to me, from the experience of President Trump's first time in the White House, that actually you have to listen to what he does, not just what he says. You have to be very careful to separate out the rhetoric, the softening up process that we've discussed, from the reality of what he actually does. And the discussion that apparently is going to take place on Friday between him and the Ukraine president, you know, could not have been contemplated a week ago when he was telling the world that Zelensky was a dictator. Now he's rowed back from that, as you say, in relation to whatever is in this deal, to a situation where he's going to welcome him to the White House, sign a deal. Now, that looks good for Ukraine. We don't know what else will be agreed over Ukraine's head with Russia, but nevertheless, that's helpful at this stage.
OK, thank you very much. So let's move on to our next story now. Please stick with us. And it's about kebabs. It's about food because, of course, cutting back on 2 kebabs worth of meat per week is said that Britain's climate's future could be more secure. Now, the Climate Change Committee, that sounds a bit miserable, doesn't it? Say that small lifestyle changes and phasing out gas boilers will be enough to keep the country on track for net zero by 2050. But with rising energy costs and government intervention needed to push these changes through, is this a realistic plan or just yet another case of climate targets over-promising, under-delivering and sacrificing more things that we like in the process and making life completely and utterly joyless? Well, I'm joined in the studio now by the CEO and the founder of Climate Explorers, Isaac Kenyon. And, of course, I'll get the reaction from my panel after them. Isaac, let's turn to you first. This all sounds like a dystopian future where we have to cycle around in our Bromptons, we can't drive anywhere, we get fined if we use a car, we have to become vegans, we all basically become Jeremy Corbyn. Who wants to be a nation of Jeremy Corbyns?
I do think that there is extremities in how this has been approached with, you know, you can't eat kebabs anymore. The Climate Change Committee isn't talking about banning meat. It's talking about reducing meat, perhaps having some incentives for plant-based diets. It's talking about doing small changes, not phasing out everything, doing small changes to move to a net zero future, a more sustainable future.
How can me not having a large dollar combat, I don't know, China opening 1 coal-fired power station a week? Come on, this is pointless.
Well, there is other things that have been advised beyond just, you know, reducing our meat consumption. There's things around the tax around flying and aviation, producing less fossil fuel imports and switching to more renewable power, upgrading the grid. There's a lot of other advisories collectively that moves us towards a net zero future. There is a few, of course, we can go down the route of, you know, they can't eat the kebab anymore, but there's far more other things at play than just the kebab meat.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump, that man again, is just laughing at all this. Drill, baby, drill. You know, you're not telling me that his cabinet are going to chow down on some quinoa. You know, this is a red meat country leading the way, and if we had half a brain about us, we'd be drilling ourselves.
I come from an energy industry background. I work for a data intelligence company, Mapstand, as well. And what we are seeing is that what's happening in America is actually quite short-term thinking. It's not long-term thinking. Whereas in places in China, you're seeing a lot of innovation and green innovation because there is a huge economic opportunity.
Yeah, because they're selling it all to the West and polluting their atmosphere. We're offshoring our carbon footprint and they're selling the solar panels back to us because we're the mugs.
We're also able to be the producers and also change our own energy so that we can also compete and be part of this global market opportunity, be first into this new market opportunity rather than shying it away because, you know, other people are kind of shying it away for now. Fossil fuels aren't here forever. I'm a geologist and I know that those fossil fuels aren't going to be around forever. We do need to move on.
But not now, we don't. Let's bring in my panel, Jeff Hoon, Alexander Stafford. Alexander, I'm going to start with you first. Net zero seems to be becoming increasingly unpopular with the electorate. We've had 3 energy bill hikes under the Labour Party. They promised us 300 quid off our bill, and yet the Conservatives are also addicted to net zero. Boris Johnson couldn't get enough of it. Net zero is making us net poorer. When will political parties in Britain wake up? We need to follow Donald Trump's lead. Drill, baby, drill.
Well, I think one of the sad things about today's report is the CCC seems to be picking and choosing winners and losers. They're saying you should cut down how many kebabs you eat, but at the same time, new technologies like hydrogen for home heating or hydrogen for passenger vehicles is irrelevant to them. So they are actually choosing the future we're going to have. What I want to see when we go low carbon is that we, as the consumers, can choose how much we eat, what sort of food we eat, what sort of car we drive. We want the choice. And it seems like they're pushing us away from choice, and that is bad for everyone.
The Conservatives brought in banning petrol and diesel cars by 2030. You signed up to the Paris climate. You're just as guilty as the Labour Party.
Well, what I want anyway, is more choice. One of the things going back to cars, I don't care what sort of cars you drive, as long as it's better for the environment. Give us electric, give us hydrogen. CC are saying no hydrogen cars. So they're forcing us one way or the other. But I think ultimately we do have the responsibility to go low carbon. The whole world is going low carbon, but what we should do in the UK is build and sell the stuff abroad.
India isn't. The world's biggest.
Sell the stuff
the world's growing. The world's most fastest growing nations on. They're ignoring all this nonsense.
Oh, they're not.
That's the point. Jeff Hoon, they're ignoring it. They're getting richer. We're getting colder. We're going poorer. Our bills are going through the roof. People don't want to be lectured about what they eat for their tea.
Well, the report you're discussing actually is much more positive than you're being. It actually says we've already got 50% of the way there already.
Right, so great. So let the market decide and carry on as we are.
Well, I think what we need to do, and I'd rather agree with Alexander on this, we need choice, but actually we also need to incentivise people. I think the key to getting people to change the way they live is by giving people incentives, by giving people a reason for making these decisions. Because ultimately, achieving net zero by 2050 is about all of us. Millions of people taking individual decisions about how they lead their lives.
But what if people don't want to? And what about actually if a political party actually stood up and said, let's do away with all this and let the market decide? That isn't coming anytime soon, perhaps, to Britain, but it's already arrived in America and they voted it in their millions. Gentlemen, thank you very, very much. Isaac Kenyon and, of course, to my panel, Jeff Hoon and Alexander Stafford. More after the break. Coming next, the commemorative painting of Britain's greatest naval hero is being replaced by Yvette Cooper. Is this a modern refresh or simply a rewriting of the past? Or is it actually just a total disgrace? That's next.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Looking ahead to tomorrow, and there's some fairly wet weather affecting some parts of more southern Europe. We have a band of rain sweeping in, affecting Madeira, also Portugal and western parts of Spain. Some stronger winds here as well. A little bit drier across more central parts, some decent sunshine on offer here, but still more unsettled weather affecting eastern parts of the Med towards Greece, towards Cyprus. There's some heavy rain around, but things are looking drier, not necessarily sunny, into the weekend. Bye-bye.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
no,
isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Nigel, just spoken in the Commons about Chagos. More of that in a short while. But yesterday it was reported that the Labour government had succeeded in an ambition to remove portraits of Winston Churchill on display on the parliamentary estate. And it gets worse because now it's been revealed that a commemorative painting of one of history's greatest Britons is about to be supplanted. Yes, Lord Admiral Nelson, the naval commander, the legend behind victories in the Napoleonic Wars, and, of course, the Battle of Trafalgar, is taking second place to none other than Yvette Cooper. Yes, the decision to replace Lord Nelson with a slightly surreal interpretation of a living incumbent Home Secretary has inevitably led to some backlash. Now, is Britain moving with the times, or is this another attempt by the modern left to erase and airbrush Britain's illustrious history from existence? Well, I'm joined in the studio by the arts historian Ella Nixon and, of course, my fantastic panel, the former Defence Secretary Geoff Hoon and the former Conservative MP Alexander Stafford. Ella, let's start with you. You're the arts historian. Now, look, Nelson was one of the greatest ever living Brits in terms of his achievements, measurably so. Yvette Cooper is probably, well, not one of the greatest ever living Home Secretaries. From an art perspective, what's your take on this? Is this vainglorious erasure of heritage, or is it progress?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't say it's about erasure, but I'd say it's more about crafting narratives. So the fact that Yvette Cooper's gone up and Nelson's gone down is just kind of testament to how curators put together stories through putting together paintings. And now the Parliamentary Art Collection is a living collection, so it works around the building, and it's constantly moving around. So rather than erasure, it could be that the next government shifts these around again.
But there is there not a direction of travel, shall we say, of removing the likes of Churchill, removing portraits of royalty, removing Nelson, replacing them with feminists, with socialists, and now Yvette Cooper? They've lost the plot.
Yeah, well, this was done in response to a report following BLM to try and diversify the representation of who was shown in these offices. So it is part of a much wider movement, yes. We can open the screen there now. Sorry to be crass, but Yvette Cooper's no oil painting. And yet here we have a painting of Yvette Cooper. It looks slightly like she's like the Messiah, the saviour. In fact, she looks like she's on a pound coin. It looks to me like an old pound coin. Is this really the sort of thing we should be doing? Come on, it's ridiculous. I think the aesthetic considerations of this is really important. Like you said, it looks like she's on a pound coin. And if you look closely, it looks like she's got like a clock behind her as well. And I think the Parliamentary Art Collection is about figures who have made a significant contribution to politics, to British politics. So by showing her as someone who stood the test of time with a clock behind her, or like a queen almost on a coin, that's the bit that gets me, because they're trying to say who's going to be significant in decades, in centuries to come. But she's in office right now. Yeah, and Ella Nixon, the thing is, the clock might be ticking for her in a very different way. In fact, it's looking like reform might be projected to take her seat. Let's bring my panel in quickly, Geoff, and this is utter nonsense, isn't it?
This is about personal taste, isn't it? It's about judgments made by individual members of Parliament who sit on a committee, who make a decision about what is appropriate. And in the far-off days when I was a government minister, I had access to the government's art collection, and I would choose a couple of paintings to put on the walls of my office. I'm sure if you'd have come in, you'd have been appalled. You wouldn't have liked them, because my taste probably different from the taste of a Nottingham Forest supporter. And in those circumstances, I think it's entirely appropriate for individuals to take those decisions.
OK, we're going to leave it there. I won't rise to that Nottingham Forest thing, because Derby County are currently second bottom of a lower league. Now then, as I said earlier in the show, Nigel Farage has been in the Commons voting on that historic Chagos Islands deal motion. He's been speaking about it and has wildly suggested that we sell it to America. Take a listen.
Chagos is not especially high on the American agenda at the moment. I would love to see the American administration veto this terrible deal. But I'm not even sure then that this government will move its position. They are clearly hell-bent on giving away the Chagos Islands, whatever the risks to to global security, whatever the risks to our own budgetary constraints, and having ignored completely the will of the majority of the Chagosian people. If that's the case, I would rather see America have the sovereignty of the Chagos Islands than a corrupt Mauritius. Why don't we, if we're going to give this up, let's sell. Let's get a few billion quid for the Mauritius Islands, for the Chagos Islands. Mauritius has no legal basis, no legal claim, and you know what? Investment would come. The Chagosians could go back and get well-paid jobs. I want us to keep sovereignty, but if you're prepared to give away this country's interests, sell it to America, don't give it away to corrupt Mauritius.
Well, Nigel Farage there, certainly putting the cat amongst the pigeons. They could hardly contain their reaction, shouting out in Commons a short while ago. Let's get back to my panel, of course, Jeff Hoon and Alexander Stafford. Jeff Hoon, I'm going to speak to you first on this. A controversial idea. If we were going to give it away and lose 16 billion quid perhaps, let's make a few billion quid from Donald Trump. But I want to ask you, as a former Defence Secretary, is giving the Chagos Islands away a terrible idea?
I would have been very cautious about changing the status of the Chagos Islands.
That's a yes.
Because of my time as Defence Secretary, we used Chagos, as did the Americans. And I think before any decision was taken, it's important to have the support, consent, agreement of the United States.
Do you think Donald Trump is going to torpedo this deal anyway? I mean, looking at the cabinet meeting earlier on, America first, he talks about not giving an inch to China, giving Mauritius, the Chagos is giving more than an inch to China. It's practically handing it to them in 99 years' time.
I assume this will be one of the issues that the Prime Minister will be discussing with the US President. It's of vital interest to the United States to have a base. I know the agreement that has been reached preserves the base for 99 years, but at the same time, I'd want to be confident, if I was still Defence Secretary, that the US was fully behind this, and that means the new administration, not simply the previous one.
So Jeff Hoon is not behind a Great British giveaway to the Mauritius, and not even a giveaway, a bill perhaps of £16 billion. Alexander Stafford, if we're going to lose billions of pounds giving it to Mauritius, why not make a few billion quid from Donald Trump? What say you?
Well, it's not a crazy idea. The crazy idea is failing to give away a free country and being charged £16 billion to cost. I mean, the question is, when does this, for Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, come into treason? They're giving away a country against the people's wishes to a foreign hostile power. In my mind, that's unforgivable, and that's borderline on treason.
Alexander, when did the negotiations begin?
The negotiations began years ago, but the deal we got on the table about paying £16 billion to a hostile nation is happening right now.
So the Tories would have given them away for free?
I don't know what the negotiations were, but they stopped negotiations. They clearly went to talk to the Mauritius, but then they stopped the negotiations. Clearly, they didn't like what was going on. Labour said, right, go on, and we'll give you billions and billions and billions of pounds on top of it. This is a completely bad deal, a scary deal, and we should be walking as far away from this as possible, and I hope Donald Trump scuppers this deal.
Jeff, do you think that Britain will even have a say in this matter, or is Donald Trump probably already made his mind up, as he has, it seems, with Ukraine, with Gaza? He'll have made his mind up what he wants to do with Chagos, and if you were a betting man, would you say that Donald Trump is probably going to torpedo this deal anyway?
I simply do not know. Let's be clear. We don't know what he thinks about Chagos. I've not heard of any public comment that he's made about it. I think it's really important that the British Prime Minister has the opportunity of discussing the deal with him.
OK, thank you very much, gentlemen. Coming up in a moment.
The pub has so much rizz, and here's why. Spill the tea.
Viral TikTokers, you're using Gen Z slang to save an historic pub. I'll be joined by one of those magnificent campaigners in just a moment here on Farage.
Good Good evening. It's time for your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office, and I have some good news if you're hoping for some fine weather as we go towards the very end of meteorological winter. High pressure is building, and so the frontal system that's brought quite a bit of rain today and then showers following behind is all going to get cleared away because of the high that's coming in from the west. That being said, we do still have some showery rain around as we go through overnight across parts of, well, northern England into the Midlands, also across parts of Wales, and there could be some sleet or snow for a time over higher ground. But away from the cloudier zones, there will be some clear skies, and under the clear skies, temperatures taking a bit of a dip, touch of frost quite likely, especially across parts of Scotland. The sheltered glens could drop a few degrees below freezing. Elsewhere, most towns and cities just about holding up above freezing. But across Scotland, it's generally going to be a bright start tomorrow for many places. Those showers across some northern and western coastal parts in particular. A few showers for coastal parts of Northern Ireland too, but across the bulk of England and Wales, apart from a few showers towards the southwest, it's looking largely dry away from the far east, across parts of Lincolnshire, East Anglia, even towards Kent and London. A bit cloudier here and some blustery showers around coastal parts, but a lot of this will ease away as we go through into the afternoon. Otherwise, there will still be a few showers towards the northwest, but not that many, and actually a good deal of bright sunny spells to be had, a bit sunnier than today for many of us, though temperatures not rising that high, highs around 8 or 9 in the north and 9 or 10 further south. After a cold, frosty night for many overnight into Friday, Friday's actually looking like another largely fine day. Even more sunshine on offer and dry for most of us, though towards the far northwest. There is going to be a bit of cloud building in later, and that's because there's a front arriving, and that's going to bring some wet weather to northern parts as we go into the weekend, but staying dry and fine towards the south. Bye-bye.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying, and maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Farage with me, Martin Daubney. Now, in Langton Herring, Dorset, Boomers and Gen Z collaborated to save the historic Elm Tree Inn from closure. The villagers went viral on TikTok using Gen Z slang to engage a global audience, and they raised over £600,000 with significant contributions from as far afield as America. Now, with £520,000 secured, the village is set to bid for the pub on Monday, aiming to reclaim their cherished local boozer. Now, this effort highlights the successful intergenerational partnership and the power of social media in community fundraising. Is a magnificent story.
Been feeling salty about our village pub closing down.
We might be Delulu, but we're trying to save our pub from being knocked down, along with its rich 400-year history.
Our pub has so much rizz, and here's why. Spill the tea. There's a secret passage that runs from the back of the church to the pub, where they used to stash everything you needed for a brat summer.
Slay. It's absolutely magnificent. It's been viewed millions of times now across the world. They've really cut through. And I'm joined now by a member of the steering group, Friends of the Elm Tree, and its chairman, Nick Carroll. Welcome to the show. Absolutely magnificent. Can I start off by saying, how did the idea strike you?
Actually, it was one of the families in the village. They have a daughter who came back from America, and she thought it'd be quite a good idea to sort of put the Gen Z language into Langton Herring, really. And, you know, first of all, it just started off a bit of a fun skit in all honesty, and it went out, and we just didn't think an awful lot about it, and all of a sudden it started to take off, and the whole village, to be honest, most of us are the wrong side of 50, and therefore aren't that keyed up. And as you would look at one of the videos, you'll see that they ask us, what some of the words mean, and quite honestly, we were clueless. But it's a played on that, really, and everyone was quite up for having a laugh and going along with it, and we've all thoroughly enjoyed it subsequently. And as you say, it went viral, but the extent and how fast it went, it got dropped on, I think, on a Thursday night, and by Friday lunchtime, we'd managed to hook up, onto Crowdfunder, and my phone was ringing constantly, just as every pledge or donation went in. The phone would go ping again, and it was just constant, which was brilliant.
And it's a magnificent example of marrying old and new, actually pretty old people. So that gentleman there going along on his walking stick using the slang was a really, really fun way of doing it. Tell us, you're probably going to be inundated now with Americans coming over. You might actually live to regret this.
Well, yes, certainly we have a lot of pledges, and a lot of money's come from America. So, that I think they recognise what we are, which is, archetypal rural England, lovely old pub, small little village in the countryside by the Jurassic Coast. Why wouldn't you like it? We do.
Okay, and a final word from your colleague there. How proud are you of the community?
Oh, it's just been amazing. People, doing things that they wouldn't normally have done, and it's just been phenomenal, really, the success and the fact that, it's gone across the world as well. Yeah, we're expecting a few more visitors in future.
Well done to both of you. Well done to the entire community. That's the Friends of the Elm Tree, the chairman, Nick Carroll, and member Martin Pearson. Thank you very, very much, and the best of British to you. Now, coming up next, it's the State of the Nation with Matt Goodwin. Matt joins me in the studio now. Matt, what's on your menu?
Hi, Martin. Well, Keir Starmer obviously is going out to meet Donald Trump, so we're going to be hearing from Washington as to what to expect from that negotiation. Will Keir Starmer put Britain's interests first? Let's see. We're going to be talking about slavery reparations and the arguments behind that. Also, this scary new definition of Islamophobia that Labour's going to be putting forward, an important new report, says that is going to directly conflict with free speech. We're going to be talking a bit about that too. So a lot going on. We've got a top panel and a number of really great guests as well.
A short while ago in the Commons, Nigel Farage floated the idea of selling the Chagos Islands to America. But do you think, Matt, that this deal is stone cold dead anyway? Donald Trump's going to torpedo it?
I think Nigel is absolutely right, because if you listen to everybody in Washington, I was there during the inauguration and Nigel was there as well, the Americans are fed up with what they see as Britain just selling their own strategic interests down the river, selling out on Chagos, and also, don't forget, insulting Donald Trump at every possible opportunity. So I think, actually, Nigel's on the money on this one.
Super stuff. That's Matt Goodwin, State of the Nation. That's up next after this. I'll be back tomorrow, 3 till 6 p.m. on the Martin Dorby Show. And actually, I think I might be back covering on this show again tomorrow. So all the eyes are now on DC. Will Starmer get used as a toothpick by Donald Trump? I think that's most likely to happen. Thanks for your company. I'll see you tomorrow. Up next, Matt Goodwin with State of the Nation.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. It's time for your latest GB News weather update from the Met Office. And I have some good news if you're hoping for some fine weather as we go towards the very end of meteorological winter. High pressure is building, and so the frontal system that's brought quite a bit of rain today and then showers following behind is all going to get cleared away because of the high that's coming in from the west. That being said, we do still have some showery rain around as we go through overnight across parts of, northern England into the Midlands, also across parts of Wales, and there could be some sleet or snow for a time over higher ground. But away from the cloudier zones, there will be some clear skies, and under the clear skies, temperatures taking a bit of a dip, touch of frost quite likely, especially across parts of Scotland. The sheltered glens could drop a few degrees below freezing. Elsewhere, most towns and cities just about holding up above freezing. But across Scotland, it's generally going to be a bright start tomorrow for many places. Those showers across some northern and western coastal parts in particular. A few showers for coastal parts of Northern Ireland too, but across the bulk of England and Wales, apart from a few showers towards the southwest, it's looking largely dry away from the far east, across parts of Lincolnshire, East Anglia, even towards Kent and London. A bit cloudier here and some blustery showers around coastal parts, but a lot of this will ease away as we go through into the afternoon. Otherwise, there will still be a few showers towards the northwest, but not that many, and actually a good deal of bright sunny spells to be had, a bit sunnier than today for many of us, though temperatures not rising that high, highs around 8 or 9 in the north and 9 or 10 further south. After a cold, frosty night for many overnight into Friday, Friday's actually looking like another largely fine day. Even more sunshine on offer and dry for most of us, though towards the far northwest. There is going to be a bit of cloud building in later, and that's because there's a front arriving, and that's going to bring some wet weather to northern parts as we go into the weekend, but staying dry and fine towards the south. Bye-bye.
We'll see a cold snap, which will quickly develop into a warm front. Boxed Boiler Repairs, sponsors of weather on GB News.
There's just 2 weeks left to grab your chance to be one of 2 big winners in our latest Great British Giveaway. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date. Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions, but every Friday night at 9 p.m. you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to State of the Nation on GB News with me, Matt Goodwin. Now, it's a show that speaks up for you, the forgotten majority. What are we talking about tonight? The Prime Minister is on his way to the United States for his meeting with President Donald Trump. Tonight, I'm going to be asking, when will Prime Minister Keir Starmer stand up for the UK's interests? The new report has warned against a legal definition of Islamophobia, as it could stifle legitimate debate about the rape gangs. We'll be talking about that. The international judge who ruled in favour of giving the Chagos Islands to Mauritius has called on the